Ken Laird gets to sleep in a little bit today. He'll be along with you this afternoon at 4 o'clock as we have our special edition of Pirates Tailgate from 4 to 7 right outside the Trib building here. If you're down tailgating before the Bucko game, or even if you're just walking over, stop by and see Ken, Dan Dudley, and Michael Grau. Special edition as the Pirates get set to close out a homestand. Kevin Gorman's with me here, and Kevin comes in, and we got beep, 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 breaking news right off the bat today with Marquise Pouncey signing a long extension with the Steelers, significant in that it makes him the highest paid center in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think, the risk here is that Marquise Pouncey has been injured, oft injured. He not only last season missing with the torn ACL, but also missed the Super Bowl with the ankle injury. And I thought that was a huge contributing factor to that loss. Yeah. In fact, to this day, I will make the point that the turning point of that game was Rashard Mendenhall's fumble. And on that play, Doug Legursky was the center and pulled right and completely whiffed on his block, as did David Johnson, who was lined up as an H-back, completely missed on his block. And the two players they missed on, Clay Matthews, and I think I'm not sure it was Colin Jenkins, but it was an end. The two guys they whiffed on were the two guys who hit Rashard Mendenhall, one with the helmet to the chest and the other one right on the ball, and caused that fumble. They contributed to that play as much as Mendenhall did for losing the football.
But Mendenhall always remembered as the GOAT, as Neil O'Connor.
Sure he will, but that to me was that was Marquise Pouncey's absence right there. Okay. That cost the Steelers the game. That play was as costly as any play in the game.
There are injuries that come about sometimes when guys are out of shape. I mean, Lamar Woodley was a guy that got criticized for that. Pouncey's had a little bit of bad luck.
Especially last year.
Last year, as early as that was. A good thing, the ankle injury, there was only one game left. It's not like he's missed a lot of time. He missed all of last year, but before that, I believe the Super Bowl's the only game he ever missed because of an injury. It would have been more than that had that happened earlier in the year. I don't know if I've always thought that predicting someone to be injury-prone is a risky thing. That can stop at any time. It can start. You could have 6 healthy years. The question I had to you, and you broke down the numbers, the most important part of it is, in the NFL, the contracts aren't guaranteed, so how much of a risk? The only thing that's risky is the guaranteed money, and that is a little risky because it's pretty high.
$13 million signing bonus, according to ProFootballTalk.com. And according to this report that I'm reading, the Pouncey will make $17.75 million by next March, $23 million by March of 2016, and $26.5 million through the first 3 years of that deal. Now, I think he's still operating under the final season of his rookie deal right now, so I'm not sure if this is an extension or if they've torn up that contract. That's something I guess we have to figure out here. But
it was worded as an extension by the Steelers, So
5-year extensions.
The risk factor, does it go beyond injury? I mean, well, first of all, if healthy, there's no doubt that he's worth this, right? Pro Bowler as a rookie, and he's been pretty much great since he started.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's up for debate whether he's the best center in the game, but I think it's a good debate to have. When you have a guy who's in that conversation, and the Steelers have a history of having a guy in that conversation, from Mike Webster to Dermontti Dawson to Jeff Hardings and now Marquise Pouncey, that I think that's a great thing to have. And I think, you talk to any guy who played in the offensive line, the whole line's cohesiveness starts with the center. And I think that, we saw last year Pouncey's absence really contributed to that 0-4 start when the Steelers were trying to figure out who was going to play center. It took a few weeks for that line to gel, and once they did, it was a little too late for them. They had a good second half, but that first 4 games really killed them. I think this is a guy who, the thing I like about Marquise Pouncey, before I ever saw him myself in person, I talked to Ryan Mundy, the former Steelers safety, and I asked him what he thought of Pouncey, and he said, there's no way that guy's 300 pounds. And he was 300 pounds, but that was his initial impression, was this guy wears it like it's no big deal. He was a 6'4", 6'5", 300-pound guy who looked like he was 275 or 280. I mean, it was that he didn't have bad weight on him, and that was something that really stood out to his teammates, was that this is a guy who looks like an athlete.
300 pounds of muscle.
Yeah, and that's and he looks like an athlete on the field. I mean, he moves well, and that's the thing, is I think this is a great sign, not only for the Ben Roethlisberger, which we'll see what the Steelers do with him, whether they're going to extend him as well, but I think it's a great sign for the running game, which they've invested in the offseason by bringing in LeGarrette Blount.
And it's been a position, not center, but the offensive line in general has been a weakness for a few years. It now looks like it could be one of the strengths, not just because of him. The one other thing, the touchy issue there, too, the other part of the risk is, he's had some off-field stuff. Not so much him, guilt by association, the Aaron
Yeah.
Hernandez stuff with his brother. I mean, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that has a bad bone in his body. I mean, I think he's just been kind of along for the ride on a few of these things.
You know what I mean? Sometimes
his brother did get subpoenaed in that case.
I was going to say, his brother was subpoenaed. Chris Rainey was a guy who basically lived with them, and he got into some trouble with the Steelers. At some point, you have to grow up, and at some point, you have to start to, it's just he's a fun-loving guy, and at some point, and hopefully this contract will serve him notice that the Steelers have invested in him, and perhaps he'll start to take those things a little more seriously. You would imagine that his brother being subpoenaed, his brother wants a contract extension as well and hasn't gotten one yet. So that tells you a little bit about the Steelers feeling about Marquise versus the Dolphins feeling about Mike. Is that Marquise has been given an extension coming off an ACL tear. It also tells you the Steelers like what they've seen so far in OTAs, that they must have some confidence in what they've seen, that they feel strongly that this is a guy who can continue on. Now, having said that, we talked about him a couple weeks ago. Sean Lee, the Cowboys invested in Sean Lee coming off an injury, and then he goes out and gets hurt again. That's the risk you run. I mean, we just mentioned the numbers that Marquise Pouncey is going to make $17.75 million by next March. That's a lot of money to invest in a guy who, imagine if he goes out and gets hurt again this season. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But that would be a lot of money at stake for the Steelers.
I'm more worried about a guy that has a chronic hamstring, has had 3 or 4 smaller injuries, that just something always seems to be wrong, than a guy that had one catastrophic injury.
Yeah, and it was such a crazy injury. I mean, in fact, the Steelers have kind of gone on record saying that they're not going to be doing that chop blocking.
Yeah.
So they still want to run the zone blocking scheme, but they're not going to be doing that type of chop blocking that caused that injury. And I do think that
play alone may have led to Mike Munchak's hire.
Yeah.